Hey there, my lovelies. So it's time for the full moon in Leo. The full moon in Leo is happening on the 1st of February 2026, according to where you live in the world. I'm living in the London and Portugal time zone. And so, yes, it's happening on the 1st for me. But what I'm going to do in this video is take you through the planetary movements leading up to and just after the full moon. And talk about what I think they're adding to the feeling of this full moon, how they might be influencing things. I'll also then be looking at the Sabian symbol for the full moon and also the sun in opposition. The Sabian symbols I think are really interesting. They give a very well, they describe the flavor, I think, you know, like tofu. If you imagine like the full moon and the sun are like tofu, what flavor are they picking up on? What flavor are they absorbing and kind of sucking up? And so the Sabian symbols to me are like giving us an extra bit of flavoring there. And then I'm also going to be looking at the position of different asteroids. You know, are there any asteroids that are really playing into the position of this full moon? Now, this full moon is quite interesting to me because it's the first full moon. Yeah, it's the first full moon since Neptune has changed signs and gone into the sign of Aries. It's interesting that it's in a fellow fire sign. Obviously, Aries is a fire sign, and this full moon is taking place in Leo. So there's definitely a very strong fire motif right now. We are also at a time after we had Mars and Pluto come together last week. Again, they're known for very strong emotions. And that is an energy, that's an aspect that only comes around every 23 months. So this is the first time we've had Pluto and Mars together at the same time as Neptune in Aries for such a long time. And it was so interesting that Neptune moved signs and then Pluto and Mars came together. So we've had a very, very strong week with lots of different things going on. And so, yes, when we put the asteroids in, we get an even richer look at this full moon. So that's what I'm going to do. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa. Welcome to Feel Good Astrology. My whole aim here is to explore and examine different planetary energies so that you can feel into the full moon for yourself and that you get a feeling of, okay, yeah, Louisa said this, that kind of matches my experience right now. Maybe I'll look out for that. You know, it's to give you a heads up, but to help you get into astrology yourself a lot more. So anyway, let's bring up my trusty slides. So here we got the charts. So this is a full moon in Leo at 1303. The moon and sun are always exactly in opposition at the time of a full moon. That's how we know it's absolutely full. So, you know, anytime, if you look at your own birth chart, by the way, and you see that your moon is exactly opposite the sun, that's an indication you're also born at the time of the full moon. But this is where the energy of the moon, which is very feminine and instinctive and intuitive, is completely at odds with the sort of rational, more masculine, more straightforward side of you. And so it's like the archetypal masculine and feminine within us are kind of pulled apart. Or the sort of intuitive versus rational side. It's like there's a story of every human, and yet we don't feel very integrated. You know, there's a feeling maybe of a schism. Something's not quite sitting well for any of us. And so that's why a lot of people, I think, are quite agitated or irritated around the time of the full moon. Now, interestingly, as we come into the time of the full moon, you also see that Mars and Venus, they're either side of the sun. So it's interesting that I was talking about the masculine and feminine energies because, of course, Venus also represents a female energies, a feminine energies, and Mars represents a masculine, and the sun sat right in the middle. Now, you know, with the sun so close to Mars and Venus, they're not as strong as they might usually be. You know, the sun is pretty big, and you know, with its great big shine around it, it's really sort of blurring out Venus and Mars. They're still quite close to the sun. So, you know, you might not be really feeling particularly feminine or masculine right now. You might not necessarily have all of your usual mojo that you might have in terms of your physical strength, which is very much a Mars thing, and your feelings of how to defend yourself or stand for yourself. and take action. That's the Mars energy. And similarly, Venus, the yielding energy, being able to accept things, being able to receive things, and be in gratitude, I would say, is quite a Venus thing. So you may well feel that you're a little bit out of kilter right now, with the sun and the moon opposite each other, and Mars and Venus being so close to the sun. It just feels, whoa. I'm not entirely sure where I am right now. Where's my head at? And of course, what that means is that the moon is also in an opposition to Mars and also in an opposition to Venus. Now, when the moon is in a difficult aspect to Mars, we often fly off the handle. So it's interesting. So on the one hand, I'm saying you might not be able to really focus on your assertiveness or how to take action. And yet at the same time, you might fly off the handle. So it's almost like there is an impulsiveness going on, but we're not able to articulate it very well. So we're feeling suddenly jumpy, we're feeling slightly on edge, but not necessarily being able to process it very well. And then with Venus, Venus is very much about our attachments and how we relate to people. And when the moon and Venus are working together harmoniously, there is an easy way to feel attached. We really feel that sense of communion together. When they are stressed, with this full opposition between the moon and Venus, you may well feel like you want to be attached, but you don't know how to express it very well. So, things like possessiveness, jealousy, feeling very uneasy with the people around you. So this is a full moon that's creating a little bit of discomfort right from the get-go. But it goes on a little bit more. There's a lot more going on. If you see around here, around where the sun is, you've also got Pluto and Mercury. So as we're coming into this full moon, the last aspect that the moon would have made would have been this opposition to Pluto. Now, when the moon is in opposition to Pluto, Pluto is all about our feeling of dominance and power. How willing are we to step into power, to take power, to work in a strong way? Well, with the moon in opposition to it, this is well, in many respects, suggesting that we don't trust our power, we don't fully feel into our power, and it may well describe the lengths we'll go to fake our power, or to do. It's almost like our own doubt in our own potency makes us manipulate. The moon and Pluto, when they're working together in aspects, can really show how far we'll go in manipulations. Now that that sounds really, really bad. To be manipulative is this, that, and the other. But it's also quite natural. And to me, what this is really speaking about is this fear of being vulnerable. Because if we were comfortable being vulnerable, we wouldn't worry about appearing powerful. We would just accept, okay, in this instance, I don't feel very powerful. I feel a bit vulnerable, and I need to trust that life is going to have my back. But to me, what this is really describing is an inherent lack of trust. Because if we trusted that everything would be okay, we wouldn't need to do something to feel like we've got some power. So I think as we're coming into this full moon, we might be going through all these different internal conversations, working towards how you can feel more powerful. So my question to you is, as we're coming into this full moon, where do you feel vulnerable? And can you sit in your vulnerability? Can you feel your vulnerability without feeling stupid? Can you feel vulnerable and accept it? Can you be comfortable and vulnerable? Are you comfortable with feeling like naive or new or fresh to something? Because in any situation, there's a moment where we don't know enough. We never have the knowledge for the situation we find ourselves in. That's really common with all new situations. And so if you're feeling awkward, try and sit with the energy, like try and understand what is it that would make you feel more in control, but also, is it is it completely necessary? So there's all sorts of questions that this is raising, and this really goes deep, because obviously there'll be several times in your life, or not several, like hundreds, probably thousands of times in your life, where you felt vulnerable, where you felt like you haven't had what you've needed to be able to get to the next stage, get to the next conversation, get to the next breath. So yeah, this is likely to bring up some very ancient survival mechanisms. So yeah, it's not something that's easy, by the way. And if I seem to be downplaying it a little bit, please forgive me. I'm not trying to rubbish over any of your genuine feelings of difficulty. And so soon after the full moon, the moon is going to, obviously the moon keeps on moving. The moon will be moving and applying into an opposition with Mercury. So it's interesting that we've got Pluto, the Pluto opposition with the moon before the exact full moon. And then we've got the moon moving into an opposition with Mercury straight after. Now, Mercury is very much about communications and the flow of energy, moving packets of information from A to B. So he's like the cosmic parcel delivery service. And you know, with the Aquarian energy, things move quite fast, because the Aquarian energy is really quite digital, quite scientific, quite logical. And so it's logical, fast, you know, movement of ideas. But with the moon in opposition, to me, any ideas that are kind of quite radical and progressive and quite Uranian, with their sort of Aquarian energy here, it's going to feel quite inflamed. You know, the moon in opposition to Mercury really creates, I would say, a very surprisingly emotional quality to communications. You know, there's a lot of hurt that gets communicated, and so information can be very stilted. Yeah, it's really not as smooth as usual. So this full moon is really stirring up some stuff. You know, not only do we start off feeling really out of sorts, out of balance with our masculine and feminine, but we're also not able to relate to each other very easily, and also not able to really take action very easily either. You know, we are really not in our full sense of strength. And like I said, it's coming, you know, as we're leading into it, we're coming from this place of manipulation, but it's from a place of feeling weak and vulnerable. And as we're leaving this full moon, there's a sense of snippy energy. You know, our communication has a bite to it. And so this is also during this continued position of planets here, which is like a cradle between Pluto, obviously about our controls and our how we manage things, how we're also managing wealth, how we're you know, what is going on with power right now on planet Earth. We've got Uranus here, which is one of the rulers of Aquarius, FYI. And you know, Uranus and Pluto are in this continuous trine. They've been in a trine for ages now. This is really helping information to flow. It's very much about transformational uses of communication, you know, with Pluto in Aquarius, which is all about technology, Uranus, which is also about technology. To me, there are some very strong signals that we are moving away from very sort of traditional ideas. You know, the way planet Earth is moving right now is moving fast, and it's jarring. You know, it's not smooth. You know, there's a lot of new ideas coming in. And then both Uranus and Pluto are in this continued sextile to Saturn and Neptune. Of course, Neptune's just gone into Aries. So this is absolutely layering into the picture of this full moon. You know, we are all feeling slightly at sort of ill at ease, not very comfortable. And the world is going through some great big shifts. Now, mentioning layering, there's also obviously Neptune going into Aries, which it did last week on Monday, the 26th. And so this is it's there in Aries. It went in last year, but it's now here for good for the whole duration of its time in Aries. It's going to be there until 2038. It's there to I think, really bring to the forefront of our minds our understanding of ideology and how we might want to express our spirituality, how we might want to express all things to do with creativity. Now, Neptune can hide so much, and it can really show us blame, shame, and guilt. Guilt's a really big one with Neptune. And so I think, anything we felt guilty about, anywhere where we've thrown guilt and shame towards people, this is all coming out now in a very sort of direct, in your face way. And so this is absolutely underpinning all of this. As I mentioned, we've also just recently had Pluto and Mars in an exact conjunction. That happened literally the day after Neptune went into Aries. So this was such a big movement. And I think we're still feeling the after effects of this as well. It's been very stormy, by the way. Earlier this week, I was without power for 2 days, and now it's on and off, on and off. Not just electricity, but also water. We had huge storms hitting Portugal. I know there's lots of freak weather going on around the world. Lots of people have been, locked at home because of stormy weather occurring. And I really do think Pluto and Mars together, funnily enough, they're the two rulers of Scorpio, and they were exact as the wind hit Portugal. And the kind of wind pattern it had was called a sting end, or a stingtail cyclogenesis storm. It was pretty big, and it looked like a sting coming in, and it stung us good and hard. We're also 2 weeks from the solar eclipse on the 17th of February. Now, obviously, since I've got back online literally just a day ago, I've been researching the biggest storms of the 20th century and the 21st century, and looking at the astrological data. And of course, there's no real definitive, if you've got Jupiter in the 10th house and Neptune in the 6th, that is absolutely going to be a storm. We've got nothing like that. There's no one aspect that describes a storm. But one of the things I've seen, and I will most likely record something about this at a later date, and I've looked at all the charts from all sort of different sort of angles and energies, but they're all very close to eclipses. Now, I'm not surprised by that, because eclipses, either side of eclipses, there are usually freaky weather patterns. But there was the ones that have eclipses during the nodes of Pisces and Virgo, there are so many more storms. The big storms are really occurring during those times. So not only have we just had some big storms, I've experienced them up close and personal, and I know that they're going on around the world. Different people that I'm in touch with, in different, like Mauritius and in different parts of America, we're all experiencing different weather fronts coming in. But I think, with Neptune, which is pretty stormy, especially like Neptune rules the seas. During this time, I just think we're going to have more storms coming in. I think it's going to get, I think it's going to get stronger. I don't think it's going to ease off anytime soon. So these are the layering effects underpinning things. So if you're living in an area prone to flooding, I would just take some, have some precautions. Be aware of where things aren't done up tightly enough, where your fences need, what I noticed where we are is anything that was loose, anything that wasn't really accounted for, looked after, it's just been ripped apart. So just fix things, get everything fixed and in as good a working order as you can right now. To me, that's important, because whether these are manifesting in a physical way or not, I think even if they're not appearing in a physical way, they're coming up as an emotional thing. So anything that you can physically fix it. Anything that is going on emotionally, what can you do to explore it, open it up, so you can see the mechanics of the emotions you're going through, so that you can tidy up a few things before this kind of flooding of emotions comes in. And I say that quite with some importance, because as we have a look later on at the asteroids that we're using, one of them is absolutely about flooding. So anyway, let's move on to the next thing. So Yeah, this is where the first eclipse is going to be falling. If you've got anything around 28 degrees in sign of Aquarius or 28 degrees in sign of Leo, it's going to really pick up the flavor of this eclipse. If you've got angles around here, a sun or a moon, that's really going to pick it up. So anyway, the Sabian symbols. Sabian symbols, there's 360 of them. I always use Linda Hill's amazing website called sabiansymbols.com, not to be mistaken with a musical website called Sabian Symbols, but it's spelt with symbols, Cymbals. But Sabian symbols, there's one symbol for every degree of the zodiac. And when you go in and you put it in, I put in 13 degrees, the website will absolutely round it up. You don't have to round it up. The website will do that. So anyway, the channeled message for the full moon in Leo is cherub-like. A human soul whispers into every receptive ear, seeking to manifest. So this symbol implies it'll be a need for there will be deep realizations that may transform your life. Listening to one's inner voice and heeding its messages can lead you onto the next level of life. Spirit is descending, wishing to make itself known. Spiritual messages are wanting to come through into conscious expression. The trick is to be able to hear what's being whispered and translating it into useful information, as one can be misled by voices in their head, which can be confusing rather than enlightening. The thing is to discern what is useful and what is not, new realizations and impulses, having your voice heard, channeling, contacting the other side, whispering, passing on news and information, speaking and hearing. I'm guessing it could also translate as gossip as well. There's always a final couple of sentences just underneath. This is where the energy doesn't get expressed in a really positive way. So this is saying confusing inner voice, signs of instability or madness, fearing if you're not heard, you'll miss out, the need to be noticed, ranting and raving, losing the plot. So if you feel yourself losing the plot, that's a signal, I think, to just step back and to connect back into yourself. The way I do it, and this is just my way, or one of many ways that I use to get myself back in my body, is just to notice what's going on with my senses. What can I see with my eyes? What can I hear with my actual ears? What can I touch? What can I feel? Like, how does the temperature feel on my skin? If you ask yourself really sensory questions that get you back into your physical senses, you'll be back in your body and out of your head. That's my quickest way of doing it. Or I will do something that requires me to concentrate. I wouldn't recommend driving, but for me, washing up. For me, like putting my hands in soapy water and like feeling the plates and washing clothes, or washing something, just to me gets me back into my conscious flow. But you'll have your own things that you might find helpful. So that's the first thing, like an extra clue. This full moon is awakening us to extra messages if we're ready for them. And it did say channeling or contacting the other side. I always feel a bit strange about that. I don't like to invite things, but that might be because I feel way too open anyway. But, I think if you can make sure you're in the right frame of mind, that you feel like you are coming from a place of pure curiosity and consciousness, and not coming from a place of need. I think when we're needing to know something, that need can be, I think, and this is, I think everyone can channel. And when I do, I find that information pops into my brain when I ask myself a question, or ask life a question, like an open question, like, I wonder what might help me right now. I wonder what 3 things would change my life if I was to listen and take action. If you ask a question like that is full of curiosity and possibility, that's when I get my best results. And so if I pose a question like that, it always feels expanding and opening. And quite quickly, if I mind my own business straight after, or I'm washing up or brushing my daughter's hair or something like that, ideas, inspirations, little video clips come into my mind. I'll see images, I'll hear things, I'll see little vignettes play out. almost through my own eyes, and that's how I get my messages. But you might be like driving along and hearing a song, and that song triggers some kind of recall. So to me, I always think when you're in a place of open receptivity, but not demanding, begging, needing, and kind of like pulling or grasping, because there have been times when I've asked from that perspective, and I felt that the energy coming in, or the advice that came in, just didn't feel very good. It didn't feel like I was talking to my highest self, or God, or Jesus, or the universe. I mean, I don't know how you work or how you flow, but they're just my thoughts for what it's worth. So the fact that Linda is putting a little bit of caution here about like losing the plot or getting sort of instability or madness. I just think, to me, this is talking about having discernment, when you're asking for help, asking for guidance. Anyway, I always think a full moon, the degree is really important, but you always need to also look at the sun, because a full moon is not a full moon if there's no sun. And so the two of them are working together here. So the sun is in Aquarius at 13 degrees, and this is a train entering a tunnel. This shows being able to go straight ahead towards your objectives without being distracted or led off your path. The train enters a tunnel. Sounds sexual. It's on one track that leads in a certain direction, and it doesn't deviate or stop to assess where it's going. It simply keeps going straight ahead. You may need to cut through the obstacles in life and go straight ahead, regardless of the unseen hazards you may encounter along the way. You have a great deal of drive, and many others are likely to be with you, so plow on. Push through, making sure you pay attention to others' needs along the way. Deep penetration. I wish I hadn't said that about sex now. Deep penetration. Cutting through the detail. I asked for that, didn't I? Persistence, shortcuts to a desired end, going for the objective, near-death experiences, heart bypasses, physical, emotional, spiritual. And then, where it might go a little wonky is being overcautious, taking the long way around, tunnel vision, cutting people off, a one-track mind that doesn't allow for detours or deviations, or cold responses. So if you feel yourself being cold, or you feel someone's being cold with you, that's sort of an indication of, bad juju. It's like, maybe give this person a bit of space right now. But when you put the two of them together, this is an inquiring mind. This is curiosity that gives you some important info so that you can move forwards with some pace. So I think the two go hand in hand, asking for clarity and being open to high consciousness clarity, whilst also feeling a sense of natural drive and natural rhythm. So these Sabian symbols for this particular full moon, I think, are very helpful. So last thing then, let's check into the energy of the asteroids. And so I always do my asteroid searches when I'm looking to see which asteroids or trans-Neptunian objects or dwarf planets or this, that, and the other. There's so many different things, fixed stars, for instance. I'm always looking on serenu.com. It's www.serenu.com, serenu.com. I think I always have a link in my description box. Anyway, these are the ones that I selected, and I put storm in just for fun, because I thought, it's so stormy right now, whether it's actual physical weather or how I'm experiencing people. A lot of people that I'm speaking with right now have had some very stormy things going on, like with rumbles from afar that sort of come in and get louder and louder and crash and bash. So I've put storm in just for fun, just to see what came up. So anyway, there are two either side of the moon, the full moon, and one of them is Apollo, which I always think of Apollo as being the sun god. He's all about leadership. So he's bringing light. If you think of the sun shines brightly. He's a bit overbearing. So he brings a lot of light and creativity and leadership, absolutely. But it's also time to step out the shadow and into the true self. And of course, the moon here is very, very well lit. This full moon is well lit. So one of the things about this full moon is, how can you stand in your own light? How can you stand in your own true self? How can you stand in your own true power? Now, at the same time, interestingly, this full moon is also in a conjunction with this trans-Neptunian object, called, well, it was interesting. Achilles is, I guess, is how you could pronounce this. And when I was searching for this is on the one hand, I haven't spelled that right. The Greek goddess, with the death mist. She has the mist that. God, I wrote this in a right old rush. She wrote this. Sorry, I wrote this with a rush. She has the mist that veils the eyes of the dying. So she's a Greek goddess personifying despair. Oh my God, another typo. Despair, gloom, misery, and this death mist. But there is also Achilles. And so when I was doing the search for Achilles or Achilles, Achilles also came up, interestingly. The idea of the Achilles heel, the idea that there's something that holds us back. So this is interesting. This full moon on the one hand is connecting to us, stepping into leadership, coming out of our shadow, coming into our true self. But it's also potentially about that thing that wounds us. Where we might go into gloom and misery. So to me, this full moon is really showing that you could use the full moon energy to step into your brilliance, or actually to step into your gloom and misery and despair, that you have the choice. I like this. I like the fact that it does look like there's choice. Now, on the other side of this chart, we've got Atlantis. Now, Atlantis is also very interesting because there's a couple of different meanings with this. On the one hand, this could be talking about past lives where we've had significant skills, where, you might have this sense of working with crystals or working with advanced technology, working with healing, all the things the Atlanteans were rumored to have been brilliant at. But there's also a huge, huge theme of flooding. Now, is this our memories are flooded, our dreams are flooded, our intuition, our experiences, our learning, our skills are flooded? Are we flooded with new light? Are we flooded with new information? That could be really helpful. But the idea of flooding, whilst it's also very stormy, whilst Neptune's just changed signs, whilst we're coming into the eclipse season, I would watch out for that. This also is a sign of where we might misuse our energies with a self-imposed self-destruction through our own superiority or arrogance. The rumors about the Atlanteans is that they fell foul, like they developed technology that ultimately led to their downfall. So this may also bring up feelings of where you've been your own worst enemy, where by being smart or clever or arrogant, your arrogance got the better of you. So this could really trigger past life recall, if that's what you believe in. But it could also remind you of times when maybe you were about to come into your own greatness and to move forwards and feel really, really quite special. Quite rightly so, that you've done something really great, but that something to do with arrogance or something to do with overstepping things led to your downfall, which might, also describe how you step into greatness, and also how you might step into the grief or the shame or the death mist, that, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. It's a pretty hard feeling, isn't it, to go into that level of regret. So again, to me, Atlantis is also describing that we might have a choice. And then funnily enough, Albion. Now, previously, whenever I look up asteroids, I often look for a few different sources. And, just recently, Albion, I've always used it to represent England. It's an old word to describe England and the White Cliffs of Dover, which I think is the first experience that a lot of people had of viewing England, like arriving at Dover and those massive white cliffs. It's also about the ancient English roots and the idea of ancient man. It's also, if you're a fan of William Blake, Albion is absolutely there in his writings. But I found a website called vams.com that also speaks that Albion is also about a man or a woman, or about a person, who bridges social constructs and has new interest groups. So VAMZZ.com, if you go to VAMZZZ.com and look up Albion, Albion features in the charts of people who have discovered new things and who've created new ways to connect with people. And so, check out where Albion is in your chart if you're interested in this. So this is interesting because Albion is in this place here, is in a T-square between the sun and the moon. And so T-squares always bring out quite a bit of tension, suggesting that, which way are you going to go? Are you going to go towards the moon? Are you going to, with your full emotion of that full moon, are you going to step into leadership, or are you going to step into the gloom? Are you going to recall everything that happened in the past with a negative mindset, or are you going to recall what's happened in the past with a sense of possibility and positivity? Because Albion is here to remind you that you could tune into the traditional idea of mankind, the traditional roots of ancient man, or you could be stepping into a time of new ways of being a human. So Albion feels a bit like a choice point. So again, I do think this full moon carries so many different connotations, but choosing seems to be a really big theme, I would say. And then interestingly, like I put in storm just to see what was coming up. An asteroid storm is actually in a trine with the sun. And for some reason hasn't actually gone into a trine with the moon. It should do. I know why. It's because it's an asteroid, and asteroids have slightly smaller orbs. But if we were to sort of expect that storm had the same kind of reach as a planet, storm would be working quite well with the moon as well. But the storm, to me, is taking place because of our individuality, our persona, our ego. The sun here is always showing us how we're shining right now. What are we shining into the world? And so the storminess, I think, is because of our cumulative holding on to our egoic realizations about ourselves. So who knows? And maybe this is just a very, very stormy time, but the storms do seem to be connected to our self-concept. So there's a lot of different ideas here, and I don't know which work best for you, or if it's helpful in any way, shape or form. Suffice to say, this is a full moon that's bringing us really into the idea of choice. We've all got choices. What are we going to do with them? And how can you choose something that feels more empowering? How can you choose something that feels that you can feel like you're stepping into your own leadership with? That's where I would be going with this. So anyway, have a beautiful full moon. If you would like to explore this tonight, I am doing a little catch up in my community. It's free to join if you want to. It's www.school, that's SKOOL.com/for good astrology. Come join us there and we'll discuss the full moon together for a short while. But anyway, have a great one and catch up with you next time. Lots of love. Bye for now.